Hello and welcome. I'm Samantha Mackay, lead trainer at Truity, and sometimes the Enneagram can be a little bit too serious. So today I'm talking with Abbey Howe about how she teaches the Enneagram with lightness and humor. Welcome, Abbey. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell me about your YouTube channel and the way you've sort of approached teaching the Enneagram.
Well, I kind of stumbled into, I was making comedy videos on the internet already, and I became obsessed with the Enneagram in my personal life. So naturally, like the comedic videos I was making started taking on an Enneagram content niche because that was what I was really interested in. And I love comedy. I love things that are funny. I love appealing to my inner child. And so I was just like, how can I show all these cool, funny, different types of people with like sketches and little jokes, and it kind of took off from there. And that's definitely started from like a love of comedy base, and then built off of that.
So you already had, I love talking about how people's careers evolve. So you had the skill set in comedy and layered in the Enneagram and turned out to be a great combination.
Yeah, so I actually went to school for acting. And I was like really into like Shakespeare and like serious acting. And then when I moved out to LA, I started doing commercial acting. I was in a Toyota commercial, fun fact. And and I fell in love with improv. And so I started going to UCB, taking sketch writing classes, taking improv classes, writing sketch classes. And I something about that, I hadn't studied at school like that, and I was like, oh, I'm funny. I had this like instinctual belief that I wasn't funny, that I was like a serious actor. But the minute I
Right.
got into an improv class, I was like, this is so life-giving. I need to do more of this. And so I feel really lucky that part of my job gets to be making jokes and trying to make myself laugh and make my husband laugh and make you guys laugh. Like that to me is really just a cool job.
Oh, I love it. And I love how it really fills you up. You've just found that thing that excites you and gives to people. I just love that.
I love that too.
So tell me about the challenge of navigating the parts of the Enneagram that are very stereotypical, but often don't represent every version of that type, but also connecting with people in a way that isn't sometimes too serious.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between leaning so heavily on the stereotypes that it presents the Enneagram in the wrong way to people who are new to the Enneagram. And that's always something I am afraid of. But then there's also this other place of like the Enneagram being so serious and so intense and so full of like tri-types and subtypes and all of this stuff that I feel like it can be inaccessible to people who are just curious. So I wanted to do a middle ground of like, hey, let's have compassion for ourselves as people, but like, yeah, there's a grain of truth to this stuff. Like we can laugh at ourselves and also know that there's a grain of salt. Like just because I'm saying that sevens get distracted by something doesn't mean that type sevens can't commit to a project, because they totally can. So I hope in my videos I'm able to give those kind of disclaimers while also leaning into the funny, because sometimes to make jokes land, you have to go over what would normally happen in real life just to kind of give it that funny punch. So yeah, it's a fine
Exaggerated
line.
a little.
Yeah, it's funnier that way.
But sometimes when you exaggerate things, you do get the chance to see the differences between the types. So I'm pretty sure I watched one of your like breakup videos a little while ago, and you could see the different ways that the 2, the 4 versus the 7, went through that process, and exaggerating it, but it just felt very spot on. And you're like, oh, okay, I can see how they would do that, or I could see why I do it this way. I found that really useful.
Yeah, so have I, honestly. Like sometimes I get a lot of my content ideas from my Instagram, because it's so much easier to talk to people on there. And so I'll do like questions on my stories and be like, hey, like today I said, what's your type and what do you do at a baseball game? Because that's my video that I'm putting out on Thursday. And I just wanted to get some fresh ideas. And I'm just like, how do you, like, you guys are made, like there was a 3 answer that was like, I try to get on the big screen, you know, like I try to get on be so outgoing that I'm going to be on the TV. And there was a 7 saying that they didn't pay attention to the game, but they love trying to do the wave. There was a 6.
I was just thinking about how I was like, right, well, I've got to go get a hot dog. So I can't sit still. We've got to go get food and we've got to go exploring. So yes, not paying attention. I'm a 7. Not paying attention to the game. I'm off. Got things to do.
Got things to do. Oh man, it was funny. And then like the 5s were like, must learn all about the pitchers and like all these things. So like yes, those are like broad stereotypes. Like for example, like a lot of 4s said, I would never go to a sports game. I don't like baseball. My husband is a 4-wing 5, the biggest baseball fan you will ever meet. Knows all of the facts. He has a baseball podcast. So yeah, there's some nuance there, but it is fun to see like the general things that stand out to you.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so what are some of the other things you do? So obviously, you teach the Enneagram with humor, but that's, what exists for you outside, offline? What do you do with the Enneagram?
Yeah, I have kind of branched out into corporate learning. So just teaching different teams about the Enneagram and leadership. Recently, I've been creating curriculum about the Enneagram and burnout, how to use your type to prevent burnout, because I know, especially with the pandemic and everything being virtual, that burnout can be just so like close by at all times. So it's tough. So I think that a lot of people are looking for ways to love themselves better and prevent burnout and not wait till it gets too bad. So that's something that I've been really interested in.
So, I mean, I've been through burnout before. It's a really tough time. So, what are some of the ways that you can use the Enneagram to help yourself navigate burnout and then shift out of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I love about the Enneagram is it looks at the weaknesses of your personality type, and while that's not always the most fun thing to do, it does show you what the warning signs are. So if you think about it, like you're driving on a freeway or a highway and you veer off and you feel like the little rumble strips, those rumble strips are your stress paths and when you're not doing super great. And so knowing what those signs are for you, like for example, I'm a 3, and when I get burned out, I go to the average to unhealthy traits of a type 9, which means that I want to numb out, whether that be with hot Cheetos, fun games on my phone that are just like repetitive, or like binge watching Netflix shows. And those are like my go-to things. Like those are I'll numb out and I'm not going to think about anything. And all of those things don't help burnout. It just increases this feeling of, oh man, I'm such a bad person. I didn't do anything today. I just watched TV all day. And then it just perpetuates this, like very harsh view of yourself. So I think looking at yourself through a lens of self-awareness of like, oh, I watched a lot of TV today. Why did I do that? Let me look at those feelings. Okay, I'm feeling, I am doing too much. Is there a way I can incorporate restful activities into my week and make that a routine? So I encourage people to use the warning signs of their type to pinpoint what it is that they need to do to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I mean, I know as a 7 that I tend to get super busy and then I start to either completely withdraw, going to that 5 arrow and just hibernating when no one can find me, or I go to 1 and I get really controlling, like of all the things around me in some way. So, I mean, what are some other examples that people could, maybe for a type 2 or a type 4?
Yeah, well, for a 2, they, when they're in stress and leading to burnout, they're not taking care of themselves at all. They're denying
Mm,
their own desires, their needs. They're looking at everyone else and they're like, "Hey, I know what you all need, and I need nothing because I know better than everybody. So I'm just gonna pour everything into everybody else in the hopes that they all love me the way I want to be loved." But what needs to happen in that space, because you can burn out so easily when you're just ignoring everything that you need, is looking at yourself and saying, what, I am a needy person, everybody in the world has needs, what is it that I need? Is it a day alone? Do I need to ask
mm,
for help? That can be really difficult for 2s. Do I need to delegate? What is it that you need, and pinpointing that, and then and trying to, go against that. For 4s, my husband um, is a 4, and when he burns out, he gets like, he just isn't able to kind of focus on anything. Everything feels scattered and really like overwhelming. So what I recommend for 4s is doing like really small steps. Like there's a tweet going around or something that's about baby steps. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like, um, when someone says you're taking baby steps, like that is not something like a trifling thing. You know
I
what I'm
did
talking
see
about?
that. Yes,
It's
I
like
know what you're talking about. Yeah.
it's like it's taking a baby step, like they're like lurching into the unknown. It's like that's a scary thing. So I recommend 4s to take these awesome baby steps into getting into a routine or doing something that is good and
Mm,
meaningful to them. So if that's like, man, they've been working and they haven't done anything creative, um, that doesn't mean you need to sit down and write a best-selling novel tonight. But what that could mean is like set a timer for 10 minutes and you do some free writing. And that is something you do every day. And that's little baby steps to incorporating creativity and like taking care of your soul.
mm. The other thing about baby steps, as I have a nephew at the moment who's literally in this
Yeah.
process of learning to walk, is that we're so supportive and cheering of the tiniest thing, you know, half a step, standing up for a few seconds, like whatever that
Mhm.
tiny thing. Everyone's like, yes, this is like if someone's just won an Oscar or hit a home run. And it's when we get older and we look at those baby steps, we think, oh, that wasn't much. We dismiss it. We have a completely different attitude. And yet sometimes with the Enneagram, doing something really small can be really huge, and we need to celebrate our own tiny wins far more than we do, I think.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I agree. We should just celebrate our baby steps because it's hard to be alive. It's hard to be a human. Um,
I
so
have no idea
go
what you're talking
go
about.
us.
What? Yeah, and I think there is a lot of burnout, and not everyone realizing they are burnt out. I can imagine some threes might just realize that they just have to do more, and that's perfectly fine. And as a seven, when I have a massive to-do list, I just think if I just work harder, it'll all somehow go away. And yet the only way out of burnout for me is to take everything off the plate, to
Mm,
literally to let go of any expectation and to just sink into the present moment, which of course you know how I feel about. Um, but it's the key. It's doing that
yeah.
thing that's uncomfortable to get back inside the lines.
Yeah, I love that. I like that idea. I've read that it's helpful for sevens to do that, but hearing you say it, I take everything off my list. I let go of expectations and I am just present. I think that's also helpful for threes too, because I say, well, if I finish my to do list, then I'm going to feel finally at rest, at peace, and I can finally be happy. But that list is going to be full for the rest of my life. Like
Yes, it
I can
is.
always fill it. So it's like, yes, let go of the list? What can you do right now? And oftentimes that comes to how can you make yourself present in the moment? Is that yoga? Is that a
Mm.
walk? Is that putting your phone away for 2 hours? What does that look like?
Mm. And sometimes I remind myself, and this is a little bit macabre, but what do I want to say on my deathbed? Because there's only so many things about your life that you're going to remember. And
Yeah.
I'm like, is this something I'm going to tell people I did when I'm I'm on my way out, and often it isn't, and then it's like, well, then it's not really as important as I think it is.
I like that perspective of looking at the end when you're in the middle. Because there's this phrase that my favorite yoga teacher says at the end of class. She goes, we put our hands on the ground, and she says, where it all begins and where it all belongs in the end. And while that does sound macabre, like, it actually brings me a lot of comfort, because I feel like it's like a reminder of like, hey, we're all gonna die, and like, we're all here and grounded, and like, this is our time, and you're alive, and yay, you're alive. And like, for some reason, to my anxious brain, that is just so peaceful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating and very funny conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. So where can people find you to learn the Enneagram with lightness and humor?
You can find me on YouTube. It's just youtube.com/Abbey Howe, Abbey with an E. And I also have an Instagram. I'm way more interactive with people on there, and that's at Enneagram with Abbey.
Awesome. That's so cool. Right. Well, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you.